Let's do it.
Well, it's old home week, and oh, I didn't mean old. I mean, anyway, it's great to have John Gibbs back, Dr. Know-It-All,
Woohoo!
Know-It-All, and he has returned to the channel. He was kind of involved. We were really became, good buds there while we're building that book. And then all of a sudden, you were so busy, I was so busy, and
Yeah.
I'm sure glad to have you back. How you
Yeah,
been?
time goes by quickly. It's crazy. And sorry about the weird lighting. I'm in my wife's office, so I'm in Misinformation's office because our downstairs is being renovated, so my studio is kind of off limits right now. So anyway, apologies for the weird lighting, but it'll be fine.
I'm
So there we
sure
go.
it will be fine. All they care about is your pretty face. As I've been always told that I had a perfect face for radio, and now all of a
There we
sudden,
go.
yeah. Anyway, well, listen,
You said I'll tell you. That's what you said.
so we are now going to talk about I think the things that you are most excited and interested in. Maybe I'm wrong, but let's start with FSD. So where are you right now? How are you thinking about FSD? What is going on in your mind?
My biggest thing that goes on in my mind all the time is when the heck am I going to get version 12 of the software? So I'm constantly going, come on, guys, give it to me. You keep teasing it and showing it to me. So, but that's been pretty much the case since August 25th or whenever Ashok and Elon went for that ride. I was like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's have this thing. So interestingly enough, I remember version 10. We were all in version 10 about a year ago, and they had promised us version 11, version 11, version 11. It came out in March. So they're a little bit ahead of that for the folks in California, but for most of us, it looks like it's going to be March before we get version 12. So that's a
I guess
full
so.
year
Yes.
between major point releases.
Yeah.
But okay, so more seriously, more to the point, FSD 12, from what I've seen from Omar and AI Driver and a lot of other folks who've had a chance to drive it, it looks like it's the one. It's going to be the thing that will allow us or Tesla to get to a full autonomy, at least most of the time. Maybe not on some weird, it's pouring down rain on a back road, no street lights, whatever. So yeah, it might not work then, but then human beings don't work particularly well in those circumstances either. So it's okay. But I think under normal circumstances, this looks like it's the one. The other data points, and I know you're going to ask me about this anyway, so I'll just start in by introducing the topic. But seeing OpenAI's Sora last week and Google DeepMind's Genie that just came out 2 days ago now, those two are actually doing the same project as full self-driving. And so I think we're seeing a convergence, and that gives me even more confidence that Tesla's on the right path because we're seeing it work from other companies who are trying to do other things, but are effectively creating something that is this 3D world modeling. And that's
Yeah.
really cool. Yeah.
So one of my concerns about this end-to-end approach,
Right.
everything about it seems just absolutely wonderful to me as somebody who knows zero about coding or setting these kinds of things up.
Right.
But the part that sounds concerning to me is that these other systems hallucinate and they actually
Yes.
make mistakes that they wouldn't make if they were hard coded. Um,
Right. Right.
so what about that? And they kind of go backwards sometimes, even after they're
Right.
perfected, they can then get a lot of data in that causes them to go in reverse, so to speak, in terms
Yeah.
of their ability. So what about those issues?
So, well, I think the first thing and the only reason why we don't see full self-driving on the roads right now is that the stakes are so high. So if full self-driving, autonomous driving was like ChatGPT, where it's like you do something and it creates a dumb answer and you're like, oh, that was silly, let me try again. We would have had autonomous driving years ago because it's been really good for at least 2 years, maybe a little bit more,
Yeah.
but it can't be good most of the time. It has to be good all the time, like 99.999, a bunch of nines after that thing. And so the stakes are just so high that it's just impossible to get this thing done. And I actually have sort of changed my mind a little bit about it because I actually think that I think that a fully autonomous humanoid bot like Optimus or Figure AI's bot or Sanctuary's bot or Aptronic's bot or, you name it. I think those bots are going to be doing useful work before we actually see a robotaxi ride in a Tesla, a paying ride that's governmentally approved, yada, 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 right?
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
think us consumers, right? I've paid my $12,000 or whatever for full self-driving. I think that eventually they'll probably release it on the highway or something where it's pretty safe right now. I don't know how much you've driven it, but on highways, I'm pretty confident. I'm like, yeah, this thing does really well on limited access roads. So I think we'll see something like that for private users where they'll be like, yeah, you can do this under these circumstances. And the thing will give you a 30-second warning if it needs to get you to take over or something. I think that'll happen relatively quickly. I think getting all the governmental approval and everything is going to take a long time. And especially if it's in city traffic, mixture of highway and city streets and stuff like that, that's going to take some time. And I think that humanoid bots, on the other hand, it's so much easier. They move so much slower. They can stop and think for a minute if they want to. If you're going 70 miles an hour, you don't have the opportunity to go like, should I actually, oh crap, I just hit the thing. It's like, you don't get those kind of opportunities to think about stuff. So the stakes are just so high with full self-driving that we're looking at a situation where I think that I guess, like a humanoid bot would be like an undergraduate degree kind of thing, and full self-driving is like a PhD. It's like, it's going to take a long time past just getting basically good enough to be able to do it, because already autonomous full self-driving, Tesla's full self-driving is excellent. It works so well in, let's call it 98 to 99% of the time.
Yeah.
It's just, the problem is you can't have it fail 1% of the time. That's not appropriate.
But again, let me drive home again, because maybe you don't have an answer, and that's okay. But if maybe you have an answer and we just didn't get there, what about getting worse? So we've seen ChatGPT literally get worse in terms of the answers it's giving.
Well, this is a question that's just going to lead to some hate comments, but whatever. The reason why ChatGPT has gotten worse is because they've been doing alignment, and it's been very restrictive on what the answer set is allowed to be.
Oh.
So, we can take ChatGPT, we can take Gemini. We were talking about that before we started recording. I did an experiment, and I asked Gemini, the latest one. I said, I think 1.5, I think, no, Gemini, whatever the version that's online right now is. But anyway, I said, generate me an image, and this was Scott Walter that suggested this. But I said, generate me an image of the leaders of the Confederacy during the U.S. Civil War, and it refused, and it told me I was a racist, and I tried a couple of times, and it got really mad at me. I went over, and so that's dumb, but it's not dumb because it can't do it. It's dumb because it's been told not to do it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, but it goes beyond that, of course. It's not just that it's like there's a little thing that's like checked off, because like you were saying, it's not hard-coded. It's unlikely that it's hard-coded that way. The problem is that it's been reinforced and reinforced and reinforced that if anybody says a certain number of keywords, or if they want particular things to be talked about, that it's going to refuse to do that. It's been trained that way.
Yes.
So it's there's a bunch of research papers, particularly on ChatGPT, because that's been more research because it's been around longer. But they showed that the original version of the software, before they did all of the red teaming, before they did all of the alignment and safety training, is substantially smarter. It performs way better on the tests, the MMLU and all these other tests that are standard tests for these large language models. It performs way better than the one that's released to the public. And the reason why is because it's been dumbed down, and you can't have it not be able to tell you the truth about something. I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist. I'm not saying
I hear you. No, listen,
but it needs to be free to be able to discuss what it wants to and what it's been trained on. It should be able to tell you, well, there's this side of the argument, there's this side of the argument, there's different things. It should be able to tell you that stuff. But the problem is it's being trained not to. And because it's being trained not to, it actually literally makes it stupider. So that creates a significant problem.
Yeah. So humor me for a minute, though, because again, I don't know what I'm talking about. That's the problem. So sometimes when you come out of left field, you have ideas that are completely stupid. Sometimes they're not that stupid. So just for fun, if we're not going to hard code the Optimus or the FSD, politically. Okay, there's not going to be any political consideration or philosophical consideration in training these. We don't want it to hit tricycles, and we do want it to stay in the center lane. And yeah, so so that's not going to be an issue. So the training of this, did you call it red teaming? Somebody sitting there and saying yes, no, whether it's a human or whether it's an algorithm that's telling it yes, that's a good and that's a bad. I think that's how it works. When it's in the real world, though, it's going to be still continuing to bring in more and more and more and more data, right? And as that more and more and
Yeah.
more data comes in, isn't it possible that it will then tell it that it will gather some wrong information? Or do you have to have people monitoring?
Yeah. Okay. So I think that there's two things going on here. And the important part to understand is that when I drive or you drive a Tesla around, or honestly, when you use ChatGPT, you're not changing the actual thing while you're doing that. What you're doing is creating data that then gets sent back to Tesla or OpenAI or whoever. And that can then later be used to do another
Got
training
it.
run. So there's a human, there's like, or something in between, because of course they're curating the data. They don't just want every drive. And if you're an idiot driver and you crash into things all the time, they probably really don't want to use your stuff. So they're gonna be like, okay, let's not use John's thing because he crashes into stuff every couple of weeks. So, we'll just subtract that driver out of the list. So they're very carefully curating only the best drivers,
I see.
minus the stop signs.
I see.
So that's a really interesting problem because literally only about, I think, was it Ashok said like half of 1% of humans actually stop at stop signs. So they had to like take the bad drivers and they had to take them and look at their driving. So that means around stop signs, the car actually drives poorly because they had to use a bad data set. So that's actually interesting.
Okay, all right. Okay, let's move on to Optimus a little bit. Optimus, I had Scott Walter on. I'm going to set you up now because maybe you'll say something completely different than him, and then we can get you guys on and you can fight. Anyway, my main goal in that conversation with him is it seems as if Optimus now can walk well. It can do certain things, and most of these bots now can manipulate things and pick things up and whatever. Scott has said, I've heard others say, that the real key here is it goes really slow. So my question for Scott was, how hard is it to speed it up? Is it hardware, which he's more knowledgeable about? Is it software, which would be more your bailiwick, I suppose? What do we need to do to get them to human speed or close?
Ooh, that really, I don't know enough about the mechanics because, of course, we don't know how good the actuators are that they're using.
Huh?
But certainly, there's going to be a limit to how quickly they can rotate or drive something or whatever that is. So there's going to be a limitation to the hardware capabilities. My gut feeling would be that certainly a company like Tesla is not going to design these things to be bad enough that they wouldn't be able to perform at like, so I think right now it's like 0.6 meters per second walking speed, and
Right.
human walking speed is about 1.2, 1.3 meters per second. So it's like half speed.
Right.
I don't really understand why they would build their own custom actuators that only operate at 0.6 meters. Like they know how fast a human walks. It's not like it's a great mystery.
Right.
So that means that they, I would hope, have designed these things to operate more fast enough to do regular human tasks
Right.
at normal human speed because they know the purpose of this.
Yeah.
So my guess is that it's the brains that's the problem right now. And a lot of that just could be the fact that they're still working on the training, so it's still a little unsteady and everything. They haven't optimized it yet, so they may not have optimized the code, or not the code, but the neural network architecture to get the inference as quick as possible. So the likelihood is that the brain is what's keeping it slow at this point. And that's actually really good news because that's way easier to get that faster than it is to like replace an elbow actuator or something like that with a new one. So that's a big plus. Yeah.
All right. Elon kind of intimated that there would be other robots besides Optimus in other form factors. It wasn't a straight up statement. So everybody
Right.
kind of jumped on it a little bit. Have you been thinking at all about what
Oh, yeah.
bots that
Yeah.
Tesla might be looking at?
Tesla specifically,
Yeah.
I mean, I look at like 1X, for example, they have their wheeled robots, and that was a really cool video they did
Yes, it
with,
was.
gosh, what was there, like 20 of them?
Yeah,
There was a
yeah,
lot of bots in
yeah,
that video.
yeah.
But anyway, so that's one good solution. It's the Segway solution. It's basically like you're riding around
Right,
on a Segway.
right, right.
So, and that's great. I mean, you could do a lot of tasks with that, and you could see the bot could lean down and pick up things, and so I think that's useful. I don't think Tesla's going to go that way. Um, my guess would be that they might have like a torso bot. They
Mm,
might be like, look, this bot doesn't need to walk. Why are we wasting time to build legs out when all it really needs to do is like just it picks up something over here, it turns and it puts it down over here. So
right.
it could just be like a torso. And that's going to be really creepy looking if there's 100 of those things in a line. It just looks like a body cut off in half. So I can certainly see something like that happening. Um, the other purpose, I don't know. I've talked about like crazy things. I think the AI is going to help them design it eventually.
Oh,
Like I personally think that the AI is going to go like, hey, to make the factory run faster, what if we had something hanging from the ceiling that could like zip back and forth, like like the what do they call that? Not the sleds, but whatever, those things up at the top that carry things around back and forth. But like, what if we just had a bot that was hanging, or a bunch of bots up there that could hang around and like work upside down or something? That could be helpful.
I see.
Maybe a small one, a small form factor could eventually be useful because you could get into smaller spaces to be able to like put in, funky cables or something like that. But Tesla's working really hard to make that not be the case anymore with their cars, of course, with the open box method.
Right.
Sorry, unboxed method
Unboxed.
of being able to have everything connect together very, very simply. But then I think the other potential the other potential use case that Stephen, Mark Ryan, and I talked about just the other night when we had our chat was eventually these things are going to want to go off planet because they're going to be our emissaries.
Yes.
We're meat bags. We're super, super sensitive to things. We don't like to be in space. So it makes a lot of sense to send 1 million of these bots to Mars to help build housing and terraform. So in order to do that, you're probably going to first want to put them in the Sahara Desert, in the outback in Australia, Death Valley, put them in really nasty places with a lot of dust and dirt, potentially underwater. So then you're going to have to start rebuilding them and thinking about how to utilize them or how to make them super well weatherproofed and protected. So I don't think that's next year,
Right,
but
right.
but Elon has ambitions of going to Mars. And I think that the best way to do that is, aside from like a kind of a PR stunt of like getting people there, and I think that's cool. I think there's a really good value to going like
Right.
human beings have been on
Oh,
Mars and they've
absolutely.
planted a United Nations flag or something, not American, whatever. But that's really cool. But I think in terms of practicality, the first wave of immigrants to the moon or to Mars should be bots because they're just you can make a bot that works in space and
Yeah.
works on a planet and works at 1/3 gravity. So I think that'll I don't know how that's exactly going to change the form factor, but I think that would be a really good use case. And certainly they're going to be much more robust to
Yeah.
weather.
For
So
that.
yeah.
Yeah. For weather situations as well as possibly for strength situations or special circumstances. I've thought
Yes.
it's certainly
Powerlifting bot.
yes, powerlifting bot, yes, or power squatting bot or whatever.
Power squat bot. Yeah.
So then there's again, I'm bringing you things that I think maybe are in your bailiwick.
Yeah.
Dojo. So
Mhm.
everybody's asking the question, well, is Dojo moving along at the rate that it was supposed to move in order to get to 100 tera mega whatever it was flops? I can't remember. There's so many
Petaflops at this point. Yeah.
Which kind was it?
I can't even remember now. I know
Flippity
there's
flop.
petabytes
The
of memory.
flippity flops?
Flippity flops. We're up to flippity flops. That's how bad things have gotten. So yeah, Dojo is a really interesting question because it has been very much radio silence
Yeah.
about the Dojo project, and I couldn't honestly tell you just because there hasn't been a lot of information. Elon every once in a while, I think the last time he dropped the hint was when they were talking about being able to do was it exaflops? Whatever it was 100. I think it was 100 exaflops by the end of 2024.
Right.
And he was saying that Dojo was going to be part of that. They were also going to purchase a bunch of NVIDIA H100s. So
compute limited.
yeah, and he's always saying they're compute limited. So but he did say by the end of the year, there was something where he said we're still compute limited, can't do videos for fun or something like OpenAI's Sora, but by the end of the year, we expect that we won't be anymore. So we'll be able to. What does that mean? Does
Yeah.
that mean Dojo's going to be coming online in a big way? So they're going to have a huge bump in their own ability to create as much scale as they want. Does it mean they expect to have full self-driving solved at
Yeah.
that point, so they won't need it so much anymore? Interesting question. Or have they got a really, really big order in with Steve Jensen and Nvidia, and they're
Right.
just expecting them to back the truck up with like, it's like, we will take all the H100s. Thank you very much. So I don't know exactly what he meant by that, but it was very intriguing what he said.
So another subject for me that I think is in your wheelhouse is this whole business of applying Grok
Right.
to Optimus, or applying it to the car. We haven't heard much yet. We've heard that that probably is coming, and that
Right.
it will be Grok. So we'll be licensing, I guess, that from
That is going to be the
X.AI.
best conversational companion in the car. You'll be like, can you please roast me while I drive? You'll have to pull over and pour water on yourself because you'll be charred.
So have you thought much about what that looks like, or how would that?
Well, I mean, the obvious answer is you just bolt it on. So it just becomes an audio interface that just kind of runs as a layer on top. But that's also a little bit boring.
Yeah.
I mean, because then it's just like, okay, you've got a conversation partner and you're like, find me some good Indian food in this town I've never been in before. And it searches around and it goes like, well, there's 3 good options, and Yelp gives us a 4.5-star review. And then you go like, yeah, I like that one. Take me there. And then it feeds it into the navigation system. Full self-driving kicks in and it drives you there. Great. I mean, that's actually a perfectly good use case and it'll be great, but it's going to be way more interesting if it kind of like gets its tentacles in there further and actually becomes part of the full self-driving operating system and stack. And the big advantage I think that it will have at that point is memory and specificity. So 2, I guess, not just 1, 2 advantages. But the problem right now is that if you have you experienced driving full self-driving in a city you're not familiar with? Like,
No.
okay, so I have, and it's a very different experience than when I drive it around town here in Athens. Because here I know which lane to be in, where the traffic's
Yeah.
likely to get funky,
Yeah.
which light is fast, which light is slow, which, all of these little tricks and stuff that I just know because I've been driving around here for 15, 20 years.
Right.
So that makes me incredibly critical of full
Mm,
self-driving in
mm,
my own town.
yeah.
When I go, for example, to visit my parents or I go to another town that I'm not familiar with, I put in the destination. I'm like, take the wheel, FSD. It's like, you do this. It's I don't know where I'm going. When my parents live in the DC area, and so when I go, I had to go pick up my brother at Baltimore Airport a couple weeks ago, and I'd never been there before. And I was just like, take me. And the mixing bowl, all the kind of funky stuff that happens around DC, there's like suddenly you have to be in the second lane to the right, and
Yeah.
then the third lane from the left, and then the furthest right. It's just like choo, 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 like this. And if you don't know, you're going to drive
Don't
off in
know.
the wrong way. Yeah. So in those circumstances, I feel like, oh, thank goodness this thing is here because I can't drive that well,
Yeah.
and where I don't know it. And so it's a really good average driver.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that helps. So where you live,
Yeah.
you know better because you
Right.
know the
That
local.
it makes the mistake. Yeah.
Yeah, where you don't live, you don't know that. So you're like, thank
Uh,
goodness it works. I didn't realize that being over one more lane maybe would have made it a little bit faster or whatever. It's just, it works. So the problem is, how do we get full self-driving from being really good general driver to being like, you're the local driver and you know where the hell you're going and you've been driving this place all your life and you
right.
just know
Right.
all
Right.
the tricks.
Right.
How do you get it there? That's where a large language model can come in because it can remember, right? So the
Yes.
problem with full self-driving right now is it's
Doesn't.
trained on
Yeah.
everybody. It doesn't know you from Adam. It just
Right.
takes your data and anonymizes it and ingests it and figures out how to drive better in general, but it has no idea how you want to drive to work
Right.
or how you want to get to the grocery store or wherever you're going. And you have very specific knowledge of that. And
Right.
what you can do with a large language model that's really
Integrate.
integrated
Yeah.
into the thing is that can function as a form of memory. It can be like, it's like, oh, Randy's going to Whole Foods that's like 15 miles away or something. And it goes like, I have seen this, and I have what we did on the first time we drove this, and he drove me and he disengaged all these places. I have the second time we drove it when he just drove it all by himself and I didn't drive at all. I have the third time when I drove it and there was two more disengagements. It will learn then. It's a way for it to learn and have kind of a database of local driving tricks. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be you. It could be super localized. Like, this is just like Randy Kirk's FSD, right? And maybe some of us don't want that because we're not the best drivers in the world. Other ones might be like, I drive fantastic, whatever. So everyone's going to have their own version of FSD. That'll mean that they think that it drives perfectly, and their spouse is going to be like, this thing still drives terrible. But when I get in the car, it drives perfect. so,
so when I think in the early days when Scott and I were very first talking about the Optimus and how to deploy it, and we were talking about that one of the biggest and hardest parts of the deployment was going to be all the service reps that were going to be necessary to go out and help set it up and help make sure that it worked in the space and train it to work with humans and all that kind of stuff. And then somewhere along the line, I don't remember whether I said it or Scott said it or somebody else said it. They said, well, why couldn't Tesla do that? I mean, why couldn't the Optimus do that itself? Why couldn't it out of the box, you turn it on and it goes, hi. Listen, the first thing you need to do is you need to take me over and show me the equipment I'll be working on, and actually have a conversation back and forth while the setup is going on. And if you run into something that's completely impossible, either Optimus or the owner, the person managing it, could get on a Zoom, talk to somebody in customer service and say, okay, this is the problem we run into. Optimus doesn't know how to solve it. I don't know how to solve it. What do you think you want to do? And I'm thinking of the same thing with regard to this whole problem with Hertz and the cars. Is you get in the car and the car goes, hey, what's your name?
And I'm Bob. What is your name?
Yeah. The first thing I want to talk to you about is, have you ever driven a Tesla before? Have you ever driven an electric vehicle before? Have you ever used FSD? And well, let me tell you, listen to the pedal.
Right.
Right off, we want to talk about the pedal. It doesn't work the same as a normal car. And then it's a conversation. I mean, could that all be the future?
Absolutely. In fact, I think, for like rental car companies and stuff like that, that would be amazingly useful. Right now, they have those videos that I've rented a few times on Hertz, like Teslas, and they always send you an email and it's like, here, welcome to the Tesla, get used to driving it. But, who's going to actually do that? I don't, because I already know how to drive one, but I'm sure 90% of the population that rents one is like, whatever, I'll figure it out. Yeah, exactly. And then you're like, oh, it's not exactly the same as a gas car. So I think that would be incredible. And especially if maybe, like even interactively, like you're driving and you don't know that about the one pedal driving. And when you take your foot off the accelerator, it starts to slow down. So it could say like, you'd leave the parking deck and it's like, now, as you take your foot off the accelerator, notice that it's going to start slowing down because it doesn't coast like a gas car. So it could be sort of coaching you and making you feel good about it. And you're like, oh, I got a question. Like, how do I do this? My wife the other day, it was a while ago, but she went to the car wash for the first time without me, could not figure out how to get it in neutral. So she's at that point where like the thing starts to like bump against your tire and wants to drag you through.
Yeah.
She couldn't figure it out. And finally this other guy in a truck had to come over and go like, you got to do this first. So anyway, but that would be a perfect instance of where you could also just talk to it and go like, could you please go in neutral now? And things like, yes, I'll do that as soon as go into neutral when the guy in front of you gives you the thumbs up at the car wash, not like do it right this second. Because I think Tesla, it might be able to do that now. If you push the button and say go into neutral, I think it might actually do that. But it'll do it that instant. It won't do it like when it's supposed to. So.
And it's one thing when it's command driven, because sometimes you have to know what the command is. Sometimes it doesn't
exactly.
you.
Right.
Maybe another thing, if you have an ongoing conversation, I could even imagine it in terms of just your regular computer. And the computer the sound is not working. You're on Zoom and the other guy, your sound isn't working. Well, hey, computer, hey, Apple, Randy's Apple computer. How come I can't hear the sound right now? Oh, well, have you tried this?
Yeah.
You
That'd be great.
know?
Have you actually, all it's ever going to tell you is to turn it off and turn it back on.
Back on
Please
again.
turn
Yeah,
me
I
off
know.
and turn me back on again.
Reboot.
Yeah,
Okay. So, all right.
reboot me. I need to be rebooted. I think that's, I mean, honestly, I don't see why that world has to be more than a year away. It just seems like that kind of stuff is just pretty, it's a genius idea, but it's also not that difficult to implement at this point.
It would seem
So,
like it. It would seem like it. All
yeah.
right. Now we're going to turn to philosophy.
Uh-oh.
We have the potential to get into politics.
It's a dangerous year. It's
Dangerous
2024,
territory.
baby.
All right. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but now I want to dig into it a little deeper. So you mentioned about Google Gemini and the rollout not being that great, and about your experience with it, where it wouldn't even give you what you were asking for. It even called you a
Right.
racist.
Right.
So I understand that there's a lot of potential for fixing this. Okay, to the extent that the companies want to fix it, that they can fix it. But over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, we've all experienced this issue in search and everywhere else, and getting deplatformed and getting canceled and all the rest. So we know that pretty much everybody out there has a point of view. I have a point of view. You
Right.
probably have a point of view. We may not even
Yeah.
agree, but we have points of view. And how are we going to keep AI? See, it's one thing to go all the way to Elon's level and say, you know, the robots start killing us because it's the best thing that it can do to save the planet, you know.
Right.
And
Oh,
if
the old paperclip
the old
fallacy.
paperclip problem, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but what if it's a lot more subtle? What if it's more just of a matter of training and or manipulating the data in such a way as you are subtly brainwashing the population, or subtly causing shifts in thinking, especially in political years, et cetera?
Right. Whew. I think the really big problem. So there's number one, there's malicious intent, or even conscious intent. There's the, oh yeah, we think we have the right attitude, we have the right point of view about whatever subject it is, and you guys are wrong. So we're going to make sure that it answers the correct way. I think we're seeing, particularly at Gemini, I think we've seen some of that, where it's
Yes.
like, this is the correct point of view. That's not. We're going to make sure that it won't answer that way. That's honestly pretty easy to figure out because it's so ridiculous. It's like when you really push it and you're like, okay, you're like, this is so obvious. The more pernicious way of doing it is what you're talking about, the unintentional, just you have your own attitudes. Maybe it's a collective of people, live in the same place, have the same points of view, whatever it is that causes that. And it's impossible not to have that, right?
Right.
Even if you're like, yeah, like I don't have any kind of bias, that's BS, right? You know, you feel very differently probably than somebody who lives in sub-Saharan Africa about a lot of things. You probably have a lot of very different points of view from somebody who lives in like Saudi Arabia. You have different points of view than somebody who lives in Tokyo. You know, so it's like we can't help it. We are who we are. So the more pernicious problem is those things that nobody, not even the people doing it, realize they're doing it. That is pernicious because it can be very difficult. And then, you know, so let's say Google does something and it fits with the sort of American cultural norms. So I, as a user, confirmation bias wise, I'm going to see these answers, I'm going to see these things. I'll be like, yeah, that's right. Of course that's right.
Yeah.
But then somebody who has a very different point of view from that, may live someplace else or just doesn't agree with those standard points of view. They're like, no, that's not the correct thing. You should think about this more. And the problem is not so much. I just was watching Sabina Hausenfelder talk about this today, actually. Very interesting. She was talking about how people think of confirmation bias as you only look at data that confirms your point of view. But she was saying it's more subtle than that. It's actually that you don't look into something that agrees with you. So that's what I was saying. It's like, oh yeah, that's the answer that I expected. I'm not going to look into that because that's the right answer. So why would I dig into it and see how it's doing this, or if this is wrong, or if this is problematic? Whereas if it gives you a really crazy answer, like it says you're a racist for asking for the leaders of the Confederacy, you're like, well, I should probably look into that because that's kind of nutty. But if you happen to hold that was the correct answer,
yes.
And there's, I'm sure, many people who probably do. So they're like, oh, cool, that's the right answer. And they just go on and ask the next question. So that's the problem, it's not that even intentionally you're doing it. It's just that it matches your worldview, and you're like, yeah, okay, that's
Yeah,
what it should be, no
yeah,
problem.
yeah.
And that could be serious problems right there. It creates this kind of echo chamber situation. It's sort of like, I mean, it's like the worst of social media, just like jacked up to 11. Because it's like all you're doing is the language model is giving you back exactly the answers you want,
Right.
which means you're not going to question them because they're already the answers you want. So
Yeah. And
that's a
so
problem.
yeah. And so taking it to the extreme, and so I'm going to take it to the extreme now without again getting too crazy political. So we'll assume that there's also a middle ground. You gave two
Mhm.
different possibilities. One is
Right.
intentional, and the other is it's just worldview of the folks that are doing it. But
Right.
there could be a middle ground, which is it's intentional, but it's subtle. So you're not
Yes.
doing it in such a you're purposefully trying to do it in such a way as you're not going to get caught, you're not going to get found out. And you're clever enough, as an
Yes.
organization or as an individual to get that done. So that brings into play the question, the ultimate question, which is we have 4, 5, 6, 7 big companies now
Yes.
that are all monopolies in their
Yes.
own place. YouTube is clearly a monopoly in that space. Uh,
Right.
Google is clearly a monopoly on search.
Yeah.
Now, will they be a monopoly in 5 years? I don't know, but right
Right.
today, they're a
Yeah.
monopoly. This is unquestionable. But we don't have a lot of cries right now for any of these companies to be broken up or somehow deprived of having that much power. What do you think?
Man. I think part of the problem is if you look back to the 1980s, and so for all you young folks, like Ma Bell used to be a monopoly. It was huge. And monopolies, at least in the United States, are de facto not illegal. It's abuse of monopoly power to, stamp down competition. That's the part that's illegal. But but Ma Bell was built up over what, at AT&T. It was American Telephone and Telegraph. So
Right.
that's how old it was.
Yeah.
1860s, something like that. So it had been around for 120 years or so and slowly accumulated this incredible monopoly status. And then the Reagan White House came in and busted it up. The problem right now is that these companies, Google didn't hardly exist 20 years ago. I mean,
Yeah.
what is it, 25 for them? But they're like an old man when it comes to this stuff,
Right.
right? These companies are just like, in terms of this stuff, are coming along really, really fast. And so you don't have 120 years to go like, that looks like a monopoly. Maybe we should do something about it. Maybe in 2 more presidential terms, we'll figure it out. It's like, it's like by the time anybody even goes like, wow, YouTube is a monopoly in that space, maybe we should do something about it. The odds are that the market is just going to have turned over and there's going to be the next big player in
The
that
odds,
space.
the odds are. The other thing, though, if you'll remember, because I'm
Right.
very old, much older than you are, is
Not
that
that much.
a generation? Anyway, it was when they were trying to break up AT&T, the big argument was, well, they've got all this infrastructure and they
Yeah.
they have all this scale. And if you break it up, then it's actually going to cost more because the companies that turn out fewer units are going to not have the same scale. They're going to have they're going to be duplicating services in the same neighborhoods, et cetera. Those were all the
Right.
arguments that were made.
Right.
And so it's going to actually cost more. Well, of course, the answer was the opposite. We ended up
Right.
with a phone revolution within
Yeah.
5 years.
We have these things now. I
I mean,
mean,
like a
that,
complete
yeah.
revolution
Yeah.
as a result of breaking those companies
Well,
up.
and also again, for the younger people, you used to actually have to pay money for long distance. You remember that? You'd be like,
Long distance. See, that's the difference between you
yeah.
and me. We had to pay money for the next area code.
Oh yeah, that's
10
right. If you
cents,
went like, yeah,
10 cents for 3 minutes just to go
right,
to the next area code. Yeah.
right.
So, yeah. So
And
it's,
then we would go out and walk our dinosaurs, instead of the
yes,
meat.
yes.
So,
So, yeah. So, I mean, so the idea of breaking these companies up would potentially not only solve part of the problem of manipulating the data, because then people could decide, I don't want to use Google search. I want to use a
yeah,
search engine that's conservative, or
right,
libertarian, or or Muslim, or
Yeah.
something where I feel more
If
comfortable.
you're in China, I bet you can do that.
Yeah,
You can
you
do,
can do that in
I'll do
China.
one that aligns with the Communist Chinese Party.
There's one example.
There's
So,
one chance.
but it might also actually create more innovation, more create more opportunities out there. Anyway,
Yeah, the danger is balkanization and echo chambers.
yeah,
The benefit is that you don't have this monolithic, we tell you what to believe.
right.
So that I don't know. I mean, I think both of them have advantages and disadvantages. Um, an entity, it's weird that we're on YouTube talking about this, but an entity like YouTube needs competition. It needs to have more competition. And I guess they kind of do in the terms of like Netflix and HBO and stuff like that, but that's not the same thing.
Yeah,
This is effectively the outgrowth of like those old cable news stations, the things that they used to have when they started cable, and they had to have cable access so that like just regular Joe Schmoes could go in and like record a show if
yeah,
they wanted to. It's like YouTube basically is that. I mean, the whole name from before it was bought by Google, the guys that actually
yeah,
started it, it was
yeah.
like YouTube. It was like
Yes.
television you made by you. And it's so old that they were talking about tubes, like
Yeah,
vacuum
right,
tubes that were
right.
inside, like so
Uh,
crazy stuff. So
well,
yeah, balkanization is a danger for sure,
yeah.
but I I have a feeling that it sounds like we align on that both of us think that breaking things up a little bit and having more internal competition in all of these spaces is a good thing.
Yeah, I think so. And
Yeah.
I think what I'm shocked at is that neither the right or the left seems to have any inclination to even begin the process,
Right. Right.
which
Yeah.
is interesting. A few
Maybe
people,
it's just because it's like a hidden monopoly.
yeah,
Like you can go AT&T's a monopoly because at the time it was like you had the choice of AT&T. Remember, you could get like that thing that would hang on the wall in the kitchen, or you could have the
yes,
princess phone or
that's
something,
right.
right?
Yes.
And actually back in the day, you only had the one that hung on the wall or the one that sat on the desk.
Yeah, that's
But so like it was very clearly a monopoly and very clearly stifled innovation. And you're like, well, okay, we can see that, but officially I can go to Vimeo, I can go to any number of video services online. It's just an effective monopoly. It's not an
yeah, because
official monopoly.
if you go on Vimeo, you're going to get 5% of the number of views that you're going to get on YouTube.
Yeah, well, I even mean as a consumer, there's just not
Well,
that
yeah,
much stuff there. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But
Because
certainly as a
why?
content creator, yeah,
Because if I'm a
yeah,
somebody who's creating content, I'm not going to bother with Vimeo. I mean, it
right,
would only take me another 5 minutes each video probably to put my videos on Vimeo. In addition, I don't do it.
right,
It's just not worth
right,
it. Yeah.
right. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. It's an effective monopoly, if
Yeah.
not a real one. But the problem is that makes the legal arguments a little more, because YouTube will cry, they'll be like, oh, poor us, there's all these other 20 other video services that
Yeah.
each get 100 views a day, or something like that. But they can at least throw up enough of a smokescreen that it would be very difficult to make a really solid case that they're a monopoly. And
Yeah.
then once you do, you then have to say, oh, and you're abusing it, because again, no problem being a monopoly in the United States. You can be all the monopoly you want to be as long as you don't abuse that power.
I think they're abusing. I think they're abusing the
I,
YouTube power because they are
yeah.
deplatforming people, and they are
Oh, yeah.
also not paying you and I enough.
There we go. That's the real credit. It's a
That's the really
crime.
important
They
one.
need to pay us more money. But yeah. So I think I'm just saying that if you want to beat the U.S. Department of Justice and go after them, good luck to you to make that actually stick. It might take 5 years, and by then there's another
Oh, it will
president in
take.
the White
Oh,
House.
no,
And
that's
yeah,
another
yeah,
reason why I'm wondering why nobody's even started the process. Because no,
right, right.
it took AT&T, Standard Oil took years and years and years to break up Standard Oil.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Years and years and years to break up AT&T. So there's no
right.
question of that part. Yeah, it'll take a very long time.
It's kind of, I also remember the Microsoft Apple like suits that went on in the mid 90s when Apple was dying. And Mike, they finally came to terms, and Microsoft gave them Microsoft Word to use on the
Yeah,
Macintosh and all that
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah.
And so they came to terms, but the argument was that Microsoft is a monopoly and they're abusing that monopoly, but that never got resolved. That was in court for years.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. And, and in fact, I think you could still make the case that
oh, yeah,
Microsoft Suite is probably still a monopoly. The
right.
Word
Well, and they are sure making a play for artificial intelligence right
oh
now.
boy,
They are making a big play in that space. So yeah. did you see that they were one of the big investors in Figure as
Yeah,
well as OpenAI, of course.
yeah,
A
yeah.
lot of money to OpenAI, but also Figure as well. So I think Satya Nadella is he's a smart guy. Like I really like him. I think he's probably, including Bill Gates, he's probably their best CEO ever. Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
think, yeah, he's a really clever guy and a really good businessman and understands where to go. Not that I'm super comfortable with that because again, monopoly,
Right,
they're going for winner takes all here, and it's a pretty serious competition at this point. So maybe that's actually the point that the more important point. YouTube, you can argue, okay, whatever, it's a monopoly, it's not. What are the consequences? They may not be earth shattering, but what if OpenAI or Google or Meta or Apple or whoever gets to artificial general intelligence first?
Yeah,
And they do it in a way that they have a gap of 6 months to a year before anybody else can catch
yeah,
them. They're going to just they're just going to kill everybody else. Nothing else will exist at that point.
yeah.
They'll just take down everybody. And then you've got this mondo monopoly. So it's like, this is the thing that the government needs to be thinking about now in order to react quickly when it happens, because it could happen 6 months from now.
Good,
We
good.
might not be talking about 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, whatever. It could happen in 6 months. It's the kind of crazy stuff that's going on right now.
We live in interesting times. That is
Yeah.
absolutely for certain. As Elon has repeatedly said on X.
Yeah.
Well, John, it has been great getting back with you again and catching up. And thank you. We definitely went in some territories here that I don't think you or I have really talked about before on
Yeah.
air. And so hopefully everybody enjoyed it. If you did, hey, hit the like button. You know what? Hit the like button for sure.
Do that.
Do that. And then go over and visit John Gibbs because he is Dr. Know-It-All who knows it all or who knows almost all. Do you actually know
Something.
everything?
I don't
Can,
know anything.
can I ask
Don't
you,
listen to anything I say.
can I ask misinformation whether you know it all or not?
Oh yeah. She's my biggest fan. She says I do, so that's very
Oh, okay.
sweet.
Well, there you go.
So big shout out to Elaine. There we go. Oh, I got
Oh,
all the
look at that.
hearts.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. How did you do that? All right.
It's like it reacts automatically to it. It's great. There it goes.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know
That's so
that.
stupid.
Oh,
You
boy.
it'll do the thumbs up too if you hold it long enough. There we go. Thumbs up.
Oh, is that a Zoom thing?
Yeah, I think it's an Apple thing. You
An
can do
Apple?
it. Try the thumbs up. Do it.
Well,
Do
I
it. See
can't
what
see
happens.
myself because I have my notes in the way. I have to.
No. Oh, yeah.
Now
Just
I
hold
can.
it up for a second and oh,
That's
I
still
don't know.
a hard thing.
Mine does it.
I can't
I don't know, man.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, you're
The
special.
mysteries. It's
You're
something about AI.
You're All right, John. Thank you so much for coming
All right,
on. And
sure.
to
Thank
all
you.
of you out there, it has been great talking to you.